Today we're going to be talking about Supreme being sold, or at least being promised to be bought, as well as the rise and fall of the brand. Before we talk about the rise and the fall, let's quickly talk about this deal. This deal was announced yesterday, and it follows months of speculation that VF Corporation, the current owners of Supreme, as well as other big brands like the North Face and Timberland, are selling Supreme to EssilorLuxottica, which is an Italian conglomerate that owns other big brands you probably know of, including Oakley, as well as Ray-Ban. They've agreed to pay $1.5 billion for Supreme, and this deal is a deal in principle that is going to be paid up in cash for by the end of the year. Now, this sale ironically captures the extent to which Supreme has essentially fallen off. You see, in its prime, people were making livings off of reselling Supreme. And now the reselling of Supreme itself as a brand has netted VF Corp a $600 million loss. Since VF Corp took over in 2020, the brand has gone through some tumultuous times. Their former CEO, Steve Rendell, stepped down at the end of 2022, and their new CEO, a guy called Bracken Darrell, in a bid to get the company back on track in terms of earnings and investments, is putting all sorts of the brands on the chopping block, and Supreme is pretty much the first up. So let's quickly talk about the rise and fall of Supreme. It was founded in 1994. It's a skate brand, it's a streetwear brand. It really kicked off and became super trendy in the 2010s. Long before this time, however, Supreme had a really dedicated fan base that identified with the brand's anti-establishment messaging, as well as their awesome designs and cool collaborations. But like most things in popular culture, once something is known about and once it becomes mainstream, the hype is over. As soon as Supreme got really hype after people like Travis Scott or Kanye West or Rihanna was seen openly wearing their pieces, the clout of this brand was effectively put on death row. Campouts, reselling, online forums, social media showing people flexing their latest Supreme pieces on drop day or thereafter became like the big thing. And in the mid-2010s, with Instagram booming and social media popping off, everybody wanted to get in on this trend. When you boil it all down, Supreme really only have a few main things that they've got going for it. They have these photograph tees, which is basically just a blank white t-shirt featuring a picture of someone famous. I don't need to remind you guys how much money the Kermit tees were going for on the resale market, or the Mike Tyson tee, or the Kate Moss tee. Of course, their iconic box logo t-shirts and hoodies have always been one of the hypest items that Supreme have ever produced. Quirky accessories and interesting collaborative skateboard decks, as well as their North Face collabs, have pretty much been the main things that people have been after over the years. To give you an idea of the peak of Supreme hype that I can remember seeing people outside the Supreme store in Peter Street who would be camping out for untold hours in order to go into the store to buy one of these box logo hoodies. They'd pay 160 quid for one of these box logos, and then when they leave Supreme, there would be waiting for them on the streets a whole bunch of resellers who would be offering up to and over 800, 900 pounds for the same hoodie that the kid just paid 160 pounds for. The reseller then buys the hoodie for 800, 900 quid or whatever, and then walks across town to a consignment store where they would sell that same hoodie onto the consignment store for like 1,000 or 1,100 pounds. That's how out of control the Supreme hype was in the 2015, 2016, start of 2017 era. I feel like the absolute peak of Supreme hype was the LV and Supreme collab. This went down in 2017. There was a whole bunch of pop-up locations that were announced that were immediately descended upon by all sorts of hype beasts and resellers and fashion MFs of the time. After this collab, it felt like Supreme had sort of reached the mountaintop. And I feel like the last really good Supreme North Face collaboration went down in 2017, and it was on this jacket here, the Mountain collab. This was the last, in my opinion, really good North Face collab that we had. From here, the collabs with North Face started to feel a little bit strained. I remember the snakeskin one was really dead. They had these metallic colorways of the North Face jackets that just didn't hit. It really feels like since the Mountain, there hasn't been a single good North Face collab, or at least not as good as they used to be. The sale of Supreme to VF Corp in 2020 was also another nail in the coffin for Supreme, because a lot of the people that really messed with Supreme over the years loved them because of their anti-corporate, anti-establishment placement in the whole streetwear spectrum. The idea that they would be bought up by some kind of conglomeration was really antithetical to the whole ideology behind the brand in the first place. In 2022, VF Corp appointed Tremaine Emery as the creative director for the brand. He was the first guy to take on this role. All of his predecessors had simply been taking on the role of artistic director, and it was thought that maybe he could get Supreme out of the funk that they'd been in for the past few years, but ultimately this didn't last very long. In August of last year, Tremaine Emery quit as Supreme's creative director, citing systemic racism as one of the reasons for his departure. In his resignation letter, which ended up getting leaked, he pointed to the company's treatment of the Arthur Jafar collab as his primary reason for departure, as well as a design studio that he says has less than 10% minorities working, when the brand is largely based off of black culture. And since Tremaine Emery left Supreme, I don't need to tell you guys how influential he's been in the revival of the streetwear scene, particularly with his viral and very often seen out and about denim tiers, hoodies, and track pants featuring the cotton motif. The bro has definitely done pretty well and continues to hold sway with a lot of streetwear enthusiasts out there, making it seem like Supreme kind of lost out on a lot of influence here with Tremaine. And so what does this mean for Supreme in the current day? Can they get back to where they once were? In short, I don't think so. I think the brand will continue to be really popular with people that love the brand and have always been into it. I still like Supreme, but I feel like it's kind of turning into a bit of a Bape situation where it's been taken over by this corporation. They probably want to get this store into all of these fancy malls all around the world, and so they're going to definitely dilute some of the brand image that they've built up over the years in favor of going for these more commercial markets. But that's kind of part of the gentrification game. What do you guys think? Did you guys get into the whole Supreme hype beast era? Do you care? Are you bothered? Do you think they could make a comeback and get to a point where people are camping outside of Supreme, buying stuff and then selling it on the street right there and then after? Or do you think those days are long behind us? Feel free to sound off in the comments below. And as always, guys, thank you for taking the time to watch the video. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care for now, and peace.